Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And here we go.
Live from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, welcome to episode 90 of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, the official podcast of the epicreview.com. I'm one of your hosts, the real Brad Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is...
Jerry Reed, also known as Barbecue 17. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, Jerry, it's nice to have you on the air. It's been a while since we've done this podcast. Not really. We had 2 weeks off.
I think we just skipped last week, which was fine because I had picked up the Last Jedi, which I know we're going to talk about in a future podcast again, but gave me the evening to watch it.
Yeah, that was good for you, and I know I was tired, and you were a little, under the weather last week,
I was a little coming down from... I had the flu a weekend or so ago. Last weekend I had the flu.
So, we kind of apologize for missing that week, but at the same time, Jerry had some content up. You had the Tour of the DC Universe podcast make its debut, had decent numbers. Jerry went through the Legends storyline that followed Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, Jerry, we appreciate you doing that. Tell them real quick, what's going to be your next topic on that pod for the month of April? Probably at the end of April.
Yeah, for the end of April, we're going to be talking about the history of the DC Universe, which is a book that was released after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and actually after Legends as well, that kind of went through it. And again, it is more of a actual prose than a comic book, but it's the Harbinger character detailing all of the the new origins and new backgrounds and new timeline of the post-Crisis DC universe. So it's going to be something fun, something to look at. That it's kind of where I got the name for the podcast. Instead of a tour of the DC universe, I went with a tour of the DC universe, but I based it off of this book, which is called A History of the DC Universe.
Yeah, and I learned a lot from that podcast. I learned that Shazam was an acronym and what it stood for, although I forgot. What does Shazam stand for, Jerry?
Shazam stands for he has the wisdom of Solomon, he has the strength of Hercules, he has the something of Achilles. It's not the heel of Achilles. I want to say it's the agility of Achilles. I think that's correct. He has the power of Zeus, the might of Atlas. I think I mixed Atlas and Achilles up. It's Atlas and then Zeus and Achilles, and he has the speed of Mercury.
Yeah, that's just, never knew that. You went over the stuff, the history of the character between Captain Marvel and Shazam and kind of the legal stuff there. I knew that stuff, but I did not know that acronym. So that's the cool stuff you'll find on Tour of the DC Universe podcast, which you can expect probably toward the end of each month. So thank you again for doing that, Jerry. Before we get into what we've been checking out, I got a really quick eBay story. Okay?
I love eBay stories, man. They're my favorite.
Well, this one, if I'm a little off my game tonight, it's because my blood's boiling just a little bit here from this almost eBay transaction, and I think I've upset my wife Abby over this topic too, and she just said she didn't want to hear any more about it. I don't know if she's pissed, but
I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
Yeah, she's definitely tired of hearing about it. But anyway, so a lot of people know I've been getting the Marvel Legends. I got into them a month ago when my wife Abby bought me the Black Panther Marvel Legend for my birthday, the T'Challa Marvel Legend.
So we can really blame this story on Abby. It is her fault.
No, definitely not. So it's been, don't blame anything on a pregnant woman. You should know that, Jerry. It's been about a month, and I'd probably say I've amassed about 35 figures or so.
Hey, Willikers.
Yeah, it's been a lot. I've almost got, I pretty much got my MCU collection complete at this point. But there's always more. But anyway, you know me. I'll buy something, sell it, buy it again, sell it again. So I listed this was a couple weeks ago, so this story didn't necessarily start tonight.
Okay.
So I listed it online. Guy messages me, says he's interested, talks about how he wants to maybe do something off eBay, which violates eBay user policies now.
Yeah,
Did not used to, but now they've really tightened their stuff up, and you can't even exchange a phone number
right,
or
because that's
email.
how they make their money.
Yeah, which is understandable because they were losing a lot of money off of that. So he mentioned maybe doing something off of eBay. Then he's like, okay, I'll buy them on eBay. And because he said, I listed them and he was messaging me about them. This was about a week ago.
What were you selling specifically?
I had my whole lot of Marvel Legends.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were collecting these. So
and Jerry is just hearing this for the first time, by the way.
You bought a bunch of mine from me, and then...
I bought 2 from you.
You bought 2, still.
I haven't picked them up yet.
You haven't picked them up yet. They're still here. It's true.
Yeah. Okay. If it makes you feel any better, I didn't include those in the listing.
Thank you.
But anyway, he was interested, so he said, "Won't you?" I had it at a bid starting at like 160, and he said, "Won't you just put them at a buy it now for 350?" He said, "My name's Carlo. Put my name in the title." I'm like, "All right." So I put Carlo before the listing, and he bought them for 350 plus 15 shipping. And
15 shipping.
Yeah, so I messaged him and it's like, all right, you got them, they're yours. And I awaited payment. Usually when I've sold stuff on eBay and when I bought stuff off eBay, the way eBay sets it up is really easy to just go ahead and pay right there.
Absolutely,
via PayPal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like an instantaneous thing. So then he goes, he lets me know, and I had no international buyers, by the way, but he said I'm an international buyer. But then he's like, I have a P.O. box in Miami, so you'll be able to send it there. I'm like, something about this is making me kind of feel uncomfortable. But, you know, he said he had a P.O. box in Miami, so I waited for payment. I'd probably say I waited about an hour and 15 minutes. Now, you were supposed to wait up to, I believe, I read up on this 4 days. But it was just...
You got
go
a
ahead,
decent
Jared.
amount of time. I was going to say, people do have amount of time to pay on eBay.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird. It's unusual. I mean, it always gives me caution when somebody doesn't pay, you know,
within
by
an
like
hour.
maybe the next morning after an auction ends, or if they buy it now right away. But go ahead.
Okay, so I waited and I said, you know what? I kind of don't want to sell these. I kind of don't feel comfortable about this, so I canceled the transaction because he hadn't paid. I was able to do that.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he had 100% feedback. He's like, I hate that you won't, you know, look at my I can't even say it tonight, Jerry. Reputation. Look at my reputation on eBay.
Right.
And just trust that and what other people have said about me. He's like, but if you don't want to sell, I can understand.
Yeah.
So a couple days pass. I get a few more Marvel Legends. And I was like, well, I think I want to sell these again. So I messaged old Carlo up. I said, okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to sell. This was today, okay? I said, boy, I need to go back to work, Jerry. This is what I do when I get bored. I'm not at work during the day.
You just buy and sell Marvel Legends.
But I'm about to have a kid, so that'll change here shortly. But anyway, I said, but here's the deal. If I relist these, we were going to do it on eBay, so it was completely legit. We weren't trying to go off eBay or anything. And so I can't wait to get your final take on this. As somebody who's bought and sold a lot of collectibles and other stuff on eBay. So, Jerry, I said, here's the deal. I'll sell these to you. I'm going to put a buy it now $400 with $15 shipping because I've got a few more figures here. He's like, how about $400 with free shipping? I said, okay, I'll do it. If you can promise me I'll be shipping to an American address and you can promise me you'll pay right away via PayPal. He said, I promise. Just go ahead and relist them. So I relisted them. $400, just like we discussed. Within 2 minutes, Jerry, he bought them on eBay. He didn't pay for them, okay?
Right.
But he bought them on eBay, which are two separate things. So I wait like 5-10 minutes because he said he would pay right away. So I said,
you can set that up in your settings that if someone hits buy it now, it doesn't complete until they pay it right away.
Oh, I need to do that then.
You make sure to do that in the future.
However, so what ends up happening is he buys them. And I wait about, I said, and then I messaged him back. I said, are you paying? Like you said, he said, paying now. So I waited about 10 more minutes. So this probably takes place over about a 30-minute time span from when he bought it to when I go back in at the end. And Jerry, I canceled the transaction. And then he messages me back after I cancel it. Keep in mind, I messaged him again and was like, are you paying? And he didn't message back. And then after I cancel, I mean, this is literally right before we came on the air tonight, he was like, I'm going to qualify you negative, and his English isn't great. He's like, I'm going to qualify you negative and open up a case with eBay. I said, well, if you open up a case with eBay, all I'm going to do is just tell them exactly what happened. They got access to all of our conversations. Yeah. I'm like, I'm just gonna be like, you said you were gonna pay right. You were gonna pay right away. You didn't. I said, what's the worst thing they're gonna do? Make me sell these to you, and I get my $400?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that about the worst thing that can happen? Is they kick me off eBay? I guess I mean,
that'd be the worst. That'd be the worst that could happen, and I doubt.
Well, so, okay, I get it. It was a dick move of me to, buy and sell. But something was fishy about this, man. Like, he buys it right then. He says, I'm paying right now. Like, he seems hell-bent on it. And then once he buys it, he doesn't pay. I'm like, are you paying? About 2 times. And then he never responds until I cancel the transaction. So, I mean, what do you think happens? Do you think he will open up a case, and will eBay do anything?
I mean, I don't think there's... Again, you didn't...
I never had his money in my account.
You never had his money. I mean, I think you can legitimately... I don't think they're going to do much. I mean, again, that's just my opinion. I don't think they're really going to do much of anything.
The way I look at it, there's a couple scenarios. Like you said, worst case, they kick me off eBay. Best case, they give me a slap on the wrist, and maybe he gives me negative feedback, which would be the only negative feedback I ever get on there.
Yeah.
Another scenario would be, I guess they force me to sell them, but then he would be forced to pay, right?
Yeah, I mean, they can't force you to sell. Again, the only time it seems like anything can happen is if there's money that's gone through PayPal. And there's been no money.
Absolutely not.
You usually can cancel... My understanding is you can usually cancel an eBay transaction if you feel that something is not right.
Which I kind of feel dickish because I did this twice, right? It would be one thing if it happens one time. I know, but I felt something wasn't right both times.
So 2 things for everybody on eBay. One, I mean, unless you work something out with somebody and you're comfortable doing it, only ship to the verified PayPal address, which you wouldn't have had yet.
But, I wouldn't have had yet.
If you ship to that verified PayPal address, you are covered. Another thing, and I use this, some people really dislike it, but if you're shipping internationally, eBay has a international, I think it's called the Global Shipping Program. Now, my understanding is the costs are pretty high for the buyer, but you can set that, and all you are responsible for is shipping the package to eBay's, U.S.-based shipping hub. And then from there, eBay works it out, shipping to internationally, wherever that's at.
Yeah.
That's a really easy way to do it. I don't like messing with filing the forms and stuff to ship internationally. I mean, I've shipped to people I know in Canada or, that I've met on forums and stuff, but that's about as much as I've done. So I've sold a lot of stuff on eBay. I've bought a lot of stuff. I've had very few negative experiences. And anytime I've ever had a negative experience, I think it's always ended before. It's been before somebody had. It's either been someone who said I can't pay, and they bid or they won the auction, they couldn't pay, and it was simply relisting the item, which is a headache and annoying. But I mean, you're not really out anything. eBay refunds your fees. there was one time I had somebody who was bidding on something I had that was pretty expensive. And every time they kept messaging me and saying, "Do you take payment other than PayPal?" And I was like, "I do not."
And this guy, I want to say, Jerry, the first time, he's like, "I'm contacting my bank for payment." I'm like, okay.
So
what the hell does that mean?
I don't know. I mean, maybe he doesn't have access to. I don't know.
Does this not sound a little iffy though?
I mean, it kind of does. I do know lots of people who live outside the U.S. that retain a Miami-based or a border-based PO box for these purposes. So
yeah.
But again, I think the biggest thing is make sure that PayPal address is verified. And I mean, with a lot of online transactions, I mean, if you're not comfortable, just go ahead and, I mean, you have the right, as long as there's not been money sent or, goods sent, then, go with your gut.
So what you're saying is my Marvel Legends pursuits continue.
I mean, I don't know. So I've told you my thoughts on that. So.
Oh yeah, and I agree with your thoughts too about how it would be cool for my daughter to one day see those figures and start to ask about them.
It's gonna be a really good kind of touch point with your kid. My little one is nuts about all my stuff, and we'll go through and just, who's that? Why they do that? What's that? Why they look like that? And it just fascinates her. So.
Yeah, speaking of fascinating things, let's get this podcast really started with what we've been checking out this week.
Check checklist? Check. Double check checking of checklist? Check.
All right.
Okay, Jerry Reed, what have you been checking out this week?
I want to say one thing I've been checking out. So,
eBay user policies.
Yeah, sitting here on eBay. Now, so one of my favorite, it is an eBay story actually. So one of my favorite things to collect, one of my favorite toy lines ever, is the Star Wars Micro Machines from Gloob. I love Micro Machines in general, but Star Wars Micro Machines were probably my first Star Wars toys ever, other than some random ones I had as a kid that I didn't know what they were. And so I had Star Wars Micro Machines before I ever had any of the Kenner Power of the Force 2 figures. And so I've been trying, my daughter and I sit there and we spend a lot of time playing with the Micro Machines and looking at them and talking about them. And I've been trying to review some of the sets because you can't always find a lot of good, picture reviews and stuff for, helping somebody that's collecting these to compile everything. Maybe if they're looking to figure out what pieces went with the set. But one of the most interesting sets was they released these little things called mini heads. That they were little tiny. Did you ever collect Mighty Max or play with Mighty Max, Brad?
Yeah, I had Mighty Max sets, and I collected some of the Star Wars Micro Machines.
Okay.
I had Vader's TIE Fighter.
Do you remember the mini heads? Do you remember that they were like little palm-sized?
Yeah, they opened up and they had play sets in them.
Yeah, these ones were really small. They only had one figure in them. They originally released 4 sets of 3 that were available in the U.S., and then there was a box set that had a Darth Vader as well. The second series was only ever released in the U.S. through a promotion at Pizza Hut in 1998. You went to Pizza Hut, you could get, one of the 12 figures from the second series, but there were actually 16 released. There were 15 that were released on cards internationally, and then there was a C-3PO as part of a boxed set. Just this past week or so, I now have, of the international series and the ones at Pizza Hut, I now have 15 of those 16.
Oh, wow. So the one you are missing is
one of the 4 that was only ever released internationally, and it is the Snowtrooper.
Oh, I love the Snow Trooper. So is this thing going to be a beast to track down?
It may be a little bit tricky to track down. So if you're listening to the show and you have the mini action transforming Snow Trooper from Collection 7 of the mini action playsets, the mini heads from Galoob, I want it. Please contact me. We'll see what we can work out. Don't autograph it when you send it to me.
I know a buyer in Columbia who has a Miami P.O. box, Jerry.
Oh, gosh.
No. So we've been checking out a couple things because I'm on spring break. But
yeah, me too.
We'll definitely get back. And you are as well, yeah. So
yeah, I took some time off.
We'll try to get a couple things in for checking out here tonight. So here's what Abby and I have been checking out. I've talked about this in the past. Abby and I have been watching this show Parenthood for like the past year and a half. We binge watched it on Netflix. I actually went ahead and picked up the DVD set because I loved it so much. Very emotional, sappy show. One of my favorite shows of all time. So we finished that.
A lot of heart.
Oh my God, dude. It's so much heart. So much. So I feel like I'm an honorary member of the Braverman family now, which is the main family on there. Yeah, I highly recommend it, but I've talked about that in the past. Andrew and I have talked about that a lot. So we wanted to switch gears a little bit because Abby's kind of antsy. We're not quite to the due date. It's April 25th. And today is April 3rd, but we needed something to kind of lighten the mood because that show was so heavy and it kind of ended with the death of a major character. And so you know what we did, Jerry? We went back to the Jackass series that ran on MTV.
Oh my gosh.
From 2000 to 2002.
Yeah.
And I have the whole DVD box set that has every skit, but where these things get really good is the movies. So over the past 2 days, Abby and I have watched Jackass 1, Jackass 2, Jackass 3, and Jackass 2.5. So
I didn't even know they made more than one of those movies.
Oh my God, so we're just waiting to watch Jackass 3.5 and Bad Grandpa. And then Bad Grandpa and a half. I mean, Jerry, did you watch Jackass ever?
I do remember it being on, and I do remember that we would film ourselves doing not quite their level of stuff, but like one time in high school we did the gallon challenge of milk on the steps of our local city hall.
Yeah.
It's part of like a high school
How'd that work out
thing.
for you?
Lots of vomiting and we were driving down this main stretch of road in our hometown, and I mean we were just heading up to Walmart, and we had to stop at the bathroom about 7 or 8 times because a couple people didn't throw up, and I mean it messed their stomach up so bad. So yeah.
I'll share my Jackass story because we were into it big, and the movies were coming out like when I was in high school and right out of high school. Obviously the most famous skit from Jackass probably is Bad Grandpa. Johnny Knoxville would dress up and go do inappropriate things. It's like an 80, 90-year-old man.
Yeah.
But one thing we created, me, Dylan, our friend Nick growing up, we created a fat suit. So we took myself, put pillows all around it, duct taped it, put on very large sweatpants, a sweatshirt, one of my grandpa's old kind of like trucker hats, glasses, and a cane, and we would go to like Food Line and fall down and knock stuff over, and we did get kicked out of Food Line one time.
Food Line's probably still looking for you, yeah.
Yeah, but there was this one time we had just watched Jackass and we wanted to do the fat suit again, so we said, let's go to the hospital and do this.
Oh my gosh.
Now, my mom worked at the hospital, so our intention was kind of to just mess with her. So we went to her department, Jerry, and we were walking by. She worked at the outpatient at the time. And we fell down, and every nurse came running over there. Oh, my God, he fell. They thought this old man had just fallen. And my mom, they were getting a visit from, like, one of the administrative bosses at the hospital.
Oh, my God.
And my mom, when she turned around and saw it was me, I mean, she literally started beating me in front of all those people. I mean, we would do things like go outside of, like, Walmarts and gas stations and stuff, and we would, like, put oatmeal in our mouth, and we would drink bottled water and just barf everywhere. So we didn't do crazy shit. But anyway, this was all inspired by this show that ran on MTV that was kind of this odd pairing of these comedians and wannabe Hollywood stars and this kind of skater community. With people like Bam Margera and Johnny Knoxville and Steve-O and Chris Pontius and all these Wee Man and
Wee Man. I remember Wee Man doing the like the Oompa Loompa, dressing up like the Oompa Loompa and skateboarding.
Oh my! Some of these skits are just insane. I mean, there was one where a guy got the outline of a dick branded on his ass. That one is probably one of my. That was the most disturbing one for me. The best one's at the end of the second movie, Jerry. Now this was in 2006 when the second movie came out. They tried to prank this taxi driver, and the guy who was doing the skit, his name was, I think is Aaron McDanger or something was his nickname, or Aaron McGregor or something. I don't know. Yeah. But they were going to try to freak this taxi driver out, but the joke was really on him because the taxi driver was a paid actor. So they dressed him up in a turban. The Jackass guys shaved their pube hairs, and the makeup artist put the pube hairs on him as a beard. So that was step one of the prank. But they're on their way to the freaking airport, and he's saying all these things. So they're both dressed up in like full like Middle Eastern Muslim garb. I mean, completely racist and insensitive by today's standards for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the other guys is filming is dressed up. He's got like this little hidden camera, you know. And he's like, "Oh yes, I love America. Boom, boom. Oh, an airplane. So anyway, they pull over. He says, "I'm pulling over," and the cab driver beats the snot out of him, puts him in the trunk, and then he shoots like a blank gun, and he thought he killed the guy that was with him. And the prank was on this guy who thought he was pulling the prank the whole time.
Oh my gosh!
But that's probably like my favorite. But I mean, these
kind of shows were huge. The first one I always think of is like the Tom Green show, which was a little earlier.
That was before Jackass?
Yeah, that was before. I mean, that was like the late 90s Tom Green started. And I mean, he would do some of that, again, like weird stuff. Like I remember him showing up at his parents' house and throwing like a cow head in their bed. You know, like The Godfather. Yeah. And so like my friend, I mean, we were like in middle school probably when that was on, and like I remember we would like try to do stuff like we threw like a stuffed Pikachu in somebody's, like spent the night at somebody's house and threw it in their room and thought it was hilarious, or like maybe because he'd been placed in the freezer for a while or something. And then I mean that Tom Green, and then Andy Milonakis and Punk'd. I mean, all these shows definitely, now with YouTube, I mean that stuff is kind of a dime a dozen. But
I was thinking about that though. Is it, or does YouTube like ban stuff where people's doing harm to themselves? I wonder.
I mean, there's lots of people that do prank videos and stuff. I mean, I've seen people shoot themselves in the foot with a paintball gun. I mean, just I assume all that stuff is on YouTube. I don't know. I don't like actively seek it out, but.
See, we were just all into Jackass in high school, and like we would be at school or a youth group or something, and somebody would dare me. Like one time it was like the middle of the school day, and it's like one of my friends like, "I dare you to just go throw yourself into that trash can over there." And you know what I did? I threw myself into that trash can, and I got in trouble, and everybody turned around and started looking at me, and I wonder why, But anyway, it got Abby and I to looking up where these guys are now. And most of them are doing comedy or they're doing fine, but like Bam Margera has been in rehab multiple times. One of the main guys Ryan Dunn died in a drinking and driving accident, and it was one of Bam's like best friends, and he's took it hard. So it's sad to see him but he's in rehab. I hope he gets better. But I guess those guys had to have some level or feeling of invincibility to them after they survived all that stuff and became like really household names in the early 2000s for it and made fortune off of it. So anyway, we've been checking out Jackass, Jerry. What else have you been checking out?
The other thing I'm checking out, I got some older Batman. I mean, when I say older, I'm not super old, but a variety of just older Batman graphic novels. I mean, from a few years back, and one of them I picked up was really fascinating. These were actually something my parents were at Ollie's. You familiar with Ollie's? It's like a discount bargain outlet.
Yeah, I am.
My parents were at one a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, and they noticed just a bunch. You know, they like to go through the books, and there was just a bunch of Batman graphic novels, and I mean, some of them are like omnibus editions, and I mean, they were just a fraction of the price. Like some of the $50 and $60 Batman omnibus editions were, you know, $7-8, and so they bought a bunch of them and just like brought them to me, you know, when they were visiting over Easter. And first one I read was it's called Batman False Faces.
I've heard of this one, but I haven't read it.
It's actually really 4 stories by Brian K. Vaughan. So, you know, who did Y the Last Man and
Kick-Ass.
No, that was Mark Miller.
Oh, that was Mark Miller. That's right. Sorry, I was thinking of Matthew Vaughn, who directed the Kick-Ass.
Oh, directed the movie. Yeah, no, yeah. Brian K. Vaughan. I know Pride of Baghdad and Why the Last Man are the ones I always think of.
What's the big? It's like the Saga. He does Saga now.
Oh,
that's
Saga!
A really
no, okay,
big one.
You're right. I've read some of Saga too, and that is pretty good. So, anyways, but it's actually it's a 3-issue Batman. So it's really just his early stuff with DC, like his Batman stories. There's a 3-part Batman story that's actually about Matches Malone. I'm a big Matches Malone fan, you know, Bruce's alter ego. And then there's a Detective Comics, like a one-shot, and there's I'm trying to think. One was Detective Comics, and one was like Secret Files. You know, when the Gotham City Secret Files, which is one of the books that ran, I guess, early 2000s, maybe.
Yeah, I remember
late
that.
90s.
I think first issue was like 12 cents to get people to pick it up.
Oh, you're right. The 12-cent adventure, wasn't it?
Yeah, do you remember
that? Was that what it was called?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I remember that one. I have that probably somewhere. But the other one, it's cool. I mean, the book's called Batman False Faces, but Wonder Woman's on the cover. He actually did a Wonder Woman story where Wonder Woman meets Clayface.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty cool. He kind of comments in the intro that it's interesting, Wonder Woman being a character forged from clay. Why hadn't anybody ever had her go up against Clayface prior to that point? So Clayface is looking for Wonder Woman, and Clayface disguises himself as Cheetah to get Wonder Woman to show up in Metropolis, and then he sort of like wraps himself around Wonder Woman, and he's trying to absorb some of her powers through, the special, like the divine or, mythical clay that she's made from. So it's pretty cool, it's pretty cool story. But the Matches Malone story is really interesting because in this story, it turns out Matches Malone is actually a real guy, who Bruce had met at one point.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Bruce is going undercover to, try to find out what's going on with something that Scarface and the ventriloquist are doing. And, Nightwing is playing Batman and Bruce's Matches, and he's trying to get Matches' credibility back up there. So during this thing, when people are kind of wondering why whenever Matches Malone is involved, do things go bad? So Batman actually shows up, which is really Nightwing again, and he throws Matches Malone through a window. And stuff. So everybody's kind of like, oh man, Matches Malone like spits in Batman's face, and everybody afterwards, all the criminals are like, man, Matches Malone is hardcore. But it turns out that Matches Malone was a real guy, and he's shown back up, and Nightwing is kind of asking Bruce like, what's the deal with Matches Malone? So it kind of reminded me. Did you ever watch King of the Hill?
Yeah.
Remember when, for years, how Dale always used the name Rusty Shackelford, and eventually Rusty Shackelford actually shows up?
Yeah. Yes.
And he's like, I didn't die, Dale. I just moved away when we were in like the first grade or something. And so, kind of reminded me of that. But yeah, Matches Malone is like this real guy, and Bruce thought he was dead. So Bruce kind of absorbed his criminal identity to create this character. But it's pretty cool. I mean, they're all standalone stories. Just 2 or 3. Wonder Woman's a 2-issue story. The Batman one with Matches Malone is 3. The other ones are, just little. I think they're like fill-in issues. He even says in it they were issues that they kind of kept around until they would need just a standalone story for a month or so. But it's pretty cool. I hadn't read it. I hadn't read anything Brian K. Vaughan had done that was connected with the larger DC universe. But man, I love the fact that Matches Malone was legitimately a real guy. So, fun fact: when we used to play Dungeons and Dragons, my character was a half elf who was a rogue, and he had really good disguise ability, and so he had an alter ego named Flint Malone.
That's cool. Yeah,
D&D.
A nod to Matches
So
Malone.
so he would be Flint Malone when he wanted to disguise himself and join like the criminal underworld. So.
All right, so speaking of the criminal underworld, let's talk about something that Donald Trump really enjoyed that I also enjoyed, which is not happening often in today's pop culture landscape, but that is the return of Roseanne. Roseanne, a sitcom about a lower middle class kind of white trash suburban family from the outskirts of Chicago, Illinois.
Lampford, right? Wasn't it? Because the Lampford lunchbox.
That's right. From the late 80s, like real late 80s, like 88, 87 to the mid 90s, it ran on ABC. Really popular show during that time period because
absolutely.
It was one of those shows that it didn't try to portray the American family as wholesome and perfect. Like it got into the muck that is often the middle class American family, especially in the mid 90s when people were more open about what was going on instead of trying to portray themselves as perfect. So it kind of came along at a good time, or hit a stride at a good time, I'll say. And they have returned, Jerry, after, almost over a decade off the air. I think the last episode was 95 or so. And Abby and I love Roseanne, Jerry. We watched every episode of it in college when it was playing on Nick at Night. Now, I watched it as a kid, too, but I rewatched it as an adult because it's a lot different watching something like that as an adult than opposed to being a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. Completely different experience. When I was a kid, Roseanne wasn't my favorite. As I got older, it's one of those old shows that was on when I was a kid that's probably one that's the most entertaining to watch, like the most well-written and witty and stuff. And I was kind of looking forward to this. I had it on my reminder on my phone for like 2 months to set this up on my DVR. Abby would make fun of me for that. But I was kind of worried because, like, Fuller House was not even close to Full House. Not that Full House was ever a great show. You had stuff like Girl Meets World, which was never close to Boy Meets World. But, Jerry, this was different. This wasn't a passing of the torch show. This was the cast coming back. It was going to be about Roseanne, not about Darlene and her daughter, where Roseanne would cameo, right? Yeah. And it wasn't on the Disney Channel. It wasn't on Netflix. It was on the channel that it was made famous on, ABC, right? Jerry, this thing debuts to 24 million viewers, which is insane for network TV. Insane. That's about how many people watched Friends and Seinfeld in their heyday. So to have that on a show right now in the age of streaming and cord cutting is crazy. And it lived up to all the hype. I was dying laughing. The comebacks, the sharp wit of the show. Now, it is kind of right-wing. Roseanne's never made any bones about it. She's a conservative. She's a Trump supporter. But you kind of do get the other side of things because her kids were Hillary supporters. And Her sister Jackie was as well. So, and all the cast is back. It's even John Galecki's going to be back on as Darlene's. He was Darlene's boyfriend. Of course,
Right.
John Galecki, famous for Big Bang now. But Jerry, here's the thing that excites me about this show. It wasn't how good Roseanne was. That was awesome. But they automatically renewed it for a full season 11. And I think this is going to breathe life into, like, the middle America kind of family sitcom. Like, maybe, is this a chance for network TV sitcoms to come back, or is this just lightning in a bottle? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's definitely been some, a couple sitcoms that have been like not breakout, but have been like big deals in the last couple years. But definitely, it's kind of a dying, genre. In a sense, I don't know. I'm interested in it, but Roseanne was never one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I mean,
see, as a kid it wasn't, but as an
I've
adult,
gone back and watched it, as an adult. Again, like you said, on Nick at Night was probably showing it when I was in college, and I watched it. I didn't care for it that much. So, but I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting the response that it's generated. So,
oh, it is. The response is she's been a lightning rod for criticism and accolades.
What I think is so fascinating is the show. I mean, to not get too mired into it, Roseanne has been, like you said, that Donald Trump has praised the show.
Yeah,
but the show also has so many characters who are, I mean, very progressive, and or you would say in left-wing politics or whatever. So it's fascinating. Like it is sort of being both. I mean, I don't mean it in a negative way, but I guess playing both sides. Again, I haven't watched it, but isn't there like a character that's openly transgender, or at least
there is maybe
genderqueer or something along those lines. I mean, that's legit. I mean, it's fascinating to me that that the show is still having a place, because I remember as a kid, I mean, Roseanne seemed controversial because there would be characters who were openly
gay,
LGBTQ, or
her boss that was played by Martin Mull was gay.
Right, and did Roseanne's mother come out at one point?
Yeah, she did.
Okay, so I remember that was fascinating, because back then that seemed like, wow, the show was doing these very interesting things that are typically not what you associate with right-wing politics, and now I don't know. I'm fascinated, but I don't think I cared enough about the original show to watch this one, so I mean, I'm terrible about watching TV too. So.
I know. It was just hilarious. But Jerry, so we can spend time on Age of Ultron, let's hit a few epic news stories of the week.
Epic news.
Okay, Jerry. First up, John Cena has been confirmed for a live-action Duke Nukem movie.
Well, there was an way to get invisibility in the original series, so
that definitely makes sense. The question is, Jerry, number one, does this ever happen, or is it like Duke Nukem Forever? And which did happen, I know.
Did happen, yeah. I own Duke Nukem Forever.
But God, we waited forever for that game.
And it wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't. But does this ever happen, and does anyone care about Duke Nukem in pop culture today?
Yeah. So, I read the article you linked to. The two things that make me say that, yes, this is going to happen is, one, they have John Cena tied to it. And I think John Cena is at that point. John Cena has wrestled far longer than most wrestlers of his caliber in terms of star power.
Yeah.
Usually wrestlers hit that. When they get to John Cena's level, they move on to movies or whatever, like The Rock or Hulk Hogan did. And I mean, John Cena certainly has done those things, but he has stayed very much, active with WWE. And I mean, let's be honest, the man's done more Make-A-Wish than anybody. He's fulfilled more Make-A-Wish requests, I think, than any other person or organization or anything.
He's an awesome guy.
Yeah, I mean, there not many people I have as much respect for as I have respect for John Cena. So I think that if John Cena is tied to this project, I mean, I feel like it's going to be like, again, somebody like The Rock. That definitely ups the likelihood of this happening. Now, Duke Nukem. Let's talk about the property. Duke Nukem is definitely a very strange property. It is. It was popular. It was never, I mean, it had a very specific audience. I mean, as a computer game in the...
Teenage males.
In the 90s. I mean, it was a computer game, and it was largely a parody of 80s action movies. That is the only thing. If they really go with the tone that this is absolutely a parody of like what you would say is like maybe toxic masculinity, of like this crazy over the top, I think it could happen because again, we are hitting that point. We have already hit that point where 90s nostalgia is a big thing.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
I mean, let's look at
Roseanne,
Jumanji. We're definitely
Power Rangers. Oh wait,
we're definitely again that movie didn't do well, but let's be honest. Does anybody feel that movie was targeted towards the fans of the original? I don't think so at all.
And that was the big problem.
It's the big problem there. We're starting, I mean, again, the 90s nostalgia is really starting to kick into full gear, that folks who were even young kids in the 90s are starting to get to that point where they're interested in it again. Does Duke Nukem hit 90s nostalgia? I'm not sure. If the tone is right, I would definitely be interested in a Duke Nukem film. Again, I mean, it would be all about the tone, because Duke Nukem has to be over the top, but it also has to be clearly realizing that this film is a parody of, the overblown action hero of 80s movies.
I think maybe like a more comedic version of Last Action Hero.
Yeah.
Is what I'm thinking for Duke Nukem Forever. If they do it kind of as a breakdown of that subgenre of action, that uber masculinity, talking about Arnold, Stallone, Seagal, Willis, if they really kind of dive into that, then I think, it could be awesome if they break it down the way kind of Deadpool did with superhero subgenre. But I don't. You put Duke Nukem on something, and I'm wary of it. I just am. I gotta say. So, speaking of things I'm wary of, Jerry, it has been confirmed. It was rumored, but it was confirmed right before we came on the air that Woody Harrelson would be playing Carnage in the new Venom movie, which is coming out, I believe, October 5th.
Woody Harrelson.
Year. Now, I love Woody Harrelson. Abby and I just watched him in 3 Billboards outside of Abbey, Missouri, and he was phenomenal in it.
Is Woody Harrelson ever not good in anything?
He's good in every single thing he does. Like, I can't think of a bad Woody Harrelson bit. I mean, whether it's White Man Can't Jump.
I know he says that Bill Murray's the tippy top of the A-list, but sometimes I think Woody Harrelson is the tippy top of the A-list.
Whether it's him in Zombieland or it's him in True Detective. I mean, he's hit on all cylinders most of his career, but especially here of late. So when you put this on paper, I don't think it looks that good. I just can't see Woody Harrelson as the Carnage I know. But if this is some uber militant version of Carnage like the first trailer boringly portrayed, then maybe I can see Woody Harrelson as Carnage. I don't know. I always picture, Cletus Cassidy is a madman. You know who I always thought would be a good Carnage, Jerry?
Who?
one of the guys, I'm looking up his name right now, is one of the guys from Scream. He was one of the killers. He played Stu in Scream. Hold on. I'm going to tell you who it is. Matthew Lillard.
Matthew Lillard. Okay.
Do you know him?
Yeah, he was in Wing Commander, right?
I'm not
Which is
sure.
like the most random movie. There's another 90s video game series, but
if you look up Matthew Lillard, if you look at some of his older stuff too,
was he Shaggy? Was he Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo movies?
He was. I don't know why I always thought he would be. He's 48 now. I mean, he's probably a little. Well, Woody Harrelson's old too, but I always thought he would be a freaking awesome Cletus Cassidy. But that's what I'm basing Cletus Cassidy from 90s comics and the 90s Spider-Man show. What do you think, Jerry? Woody Harrelson as Carnage. Can it work? Will it work?
If they go in a different direction, you know, what this made me think of was how Michael Keaton was the Vulture. You know, you have an actor who's sort of has this very established, you know, background of just very different roles. I mean, Woody Harrelson takes lots of extremely different roles, you know, and you can have something really interesting. I mean, I really have gotten to this point where I'm with a lot of these superhero castings where I'm sort of like, I'm going to have to see it, because so many times when I thought a role was going to be a slam dunk, it just didn't work out. And so many times I've been pleasantly surprised by how good something turns out when you cast outside the box a little bit.
I just hate we never got to see that Christian Slater Joker movie.
Christian Slater's the Joker.
Yeah, but that story has been told on this podcast before. All right, Jerry.
Episode 76. Look it up. No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Now, real quick, before we move into Age of Ultron, some Marvel Comics news. Fantastic Four is returning, Jerry. It's been a book that was dead for the past 3.5 years or so, which is crazy considering Marvel was launched on the first family. So I'm excited. It's Dan Slott, who's been writing Spider-Man, Sarah Pichelli, who's a Marvel A-list artist. So I just think it's going to be a fantastic team running this book, no pun intended. Marvel 2-in-1 with Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm has been incredible leading up to it. So I'm just really, really excited about Fantastic Four returning. I will be picking that up in single issues because I said I would support it if they ever brought it back. And I am, Jerry. So I know you're not probably going to read that. But
probably not.
but I had to mention it. So
it's worth mentioning.
So we don't stretch this podcast out too long like Mr. Fantastic, let's go ahead and get into our featured review of this week, which is us revisiting Avengers Age of Ultron.
I'm gonna show you something beautiful. Everyone screaming for mercy. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change. You're all puppets, tangled in strings.
The end. The end of the path I started us on.
Nothing lasts forever.
Now I'm free.
Okay, Jerry, no stats, no setup. I mean, this movie has maybe not been talked about and seen as much as the original Avengers, but it has been dissected quite a bit since its release in 2015, May 2015, although we never got to talk about it on this podcast. So here we build up again toward Infinity War, Jerry.
We never talked about Age of Ultron?
We never did. Never was. We have talked about it. It was never a featured review.
I thought I reviewed. I thought I gave a. Okay, maybe not.
No,
Wow.
we didn't. Yeah, but so that's why we're doing it now as we continue our march toward Infinity War out April 27th. Okay, Jerry, this film gets crapped on a lot. People were so excited for this movie. It was one of the most anticipated sequels of all time following the Avengers. So we'll get into what we think about the film as this discussion progresses. But Jerry, does this film deserve the hate it gets? Because it gets some hate, man.
I'm really trying to think of how much. See, I'm not sure that I think. I don't know. I mean, I kind of looked just beforehand because I knew this question would come up. I mean, the movie's got a 75% Rotten Tomatoes score. You know, that's pretty high.
But it's so forgotten in the scope of the MCU, though. I'm more talking about it as a fan. You never bring up Age of Ultron in even the top 10 of those 18 movies.
Yeah, it definitely seems forgettable at times. I went back and I went back and rewatched this one. I know you did too.
Yeah, we both did.
And I'm not sure it deserves all the hate that it gets, but there is something off about this movie, and it's very tough for me to put a finger on.
See, I don't know if there is anything off about it. I just think following the first Avengers, we all thought coming out of that movie, Thanos was next, and we were kind of dead set on that. If you go back and listen to older episodes of this pod right after Avengers, you can hear us talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's 2018, we're still not to Thanos, so when it was Ultron, I think that fans reacted a little, oh, that's cool, he's a great villain, but everybody was kind of wanting Thanos back then, so there's that. But then, I don't know if Ultron ever felt like more of a menace or a threat than Loki did in the first Avengers. Yeah. And that should definitely not have been the case, especially a sequel. The ante should have been upped. And I think it was. I just don't know if it was conveyed enough throughout the film. Did you ever, first of all, what did you think of James Spader's Ultron, and did you ever feel he was a legitimate threat?
Yeah. I like, again, I mean, the first time seeing Ultron, and I definitely thought, it was interesting to give him the James Spader voice versus a more robotic voice, which is kind of weird. You know, I mean, again, when you see Ultron, don't you expect a more like true kind of robotic voice or something? Don't you expect more like something that sounds like, you know, a droid from Star Wars versus the clear, you know, kind of menacing James Spader voice that we get? I
don't know, but being a comics fan, I kind of always pictured Hank Pym's voice. Because he kind of created it, and it was kind of modeled after him, so I never really did. But no, that's definitely a very good point. I'm sure most people would.
Yeah. Going back through it, again, I think that Ultron has some great scenes. I mean, Ultron has some fantastic scenes in the movie, some fantastic lines, but there definitely is something about his threat level for this movie that is more of a, you need to show me he's a threat. All I hear is you keep telling me how big of a threat he is. And
he was wired into everything, right? The nuclear launch codes they talked about. He could have shut down the banking system.
But he wasn't doing that kind of stuff. And he wasn't doing that kind of stuff, which, I mean, you know, they sort of give explanations for why he doesn't, or he's focused on other things, but he doesn't feel like a threat.
It almost felt like he was a means to an end to get Vision into the MCU in a way.
I think you're very close there. to maybe why a lot of people don't like this movie is everything. I mean, it does feel like the middle act of a movie, like a middle act of a trilogy. There's lots of stuff that gets other things in place, but not necessarily a lot of resolution itself.
The Avengers take the individual movies out of them, except for Civil War. It's this weird almost, I would say it's going to be a 5-act structure, because you have this, then before you had Avengers, we talked about a couple weeks ago. You have Winter Soldier, which is an Avenger, not Winter Soldier, sorry, Civil War, which pretty much is an Avengers movie, right? Yeah. And then you have this Infinity War. Then you're going to have Avengers 5. So it's so hard to judge this in like a 3-act structure like you would the original Star Wars or the Dark Knight trilogy.
But I think it feels that way. Going back and rewatching it feels like the middle act of a film, and it definitely feels like it drags for me at times.
But it feels like it in a bad way, right? Not in the way that The Empire Strikes Back does. I know that's the golden second movie, but most movies do, where it's like, oh my God, this threat level is so much bigger than the first. It doesn't feel like a sequel or the middle of a trilogy is part in that way, but just in almost as is setting up something, like you said, which I think is a big problem. Yeah. But it sets up some cool stuff, Jerry. Some really cool stuff.
And there's a lot of good stuff in this movie. There's more good stuff in this movie than I remembered.
And a lot of it sets up Infinity War. There's 4 gems that show up. Avengers are alluded to as being Thanos' pawn. You had the Thanos post-credit scene where he's like, fine, I'll do it myself.
Right.
Banner and Stark are convinced they need to create Ultron to prevent the next big alien attack. Yeah. So it is kind of playing off of the fears that Loki brought in with the Chitauri, but building toward Thanos at the same time. And that way the film works. As a film itself, it works, but I think trying to do all those things, it almost kind of reminds me of Iron Man 2 in a way, in that it tries to just sit up so much within it that the story that's within the film struggles. It doesn't get enough time to breathe.
The thing I think that the thing for me that differentiates it from Iron Man 2 is, again, I feel that Iron Man 2 is still a very quick, snappy film. Like, it's very, bang, 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 bang. I mean, it has a very breakneck pace to it, even with its structure, where this one really feels like this one to me feels like lots of smaller movies.
Like thrown into one. I mean, there are a lot of plot threads that's going on
here.
There
are, and there are things that I'm not quite sure, needed to be in it.
I'll tell you some stuff I like about this film. I thought it was an awesome idea to have Stark create Ultron, since we didn't have Hank Pym established in here yet. It was so cool to see him and Banner create. Yeah. Well, I should not just say Stark, because Banner helped, but him and Banner create Ultron. These 2 geniuses in the Marvel Universe. It sucked that Reed Richards couldn't be there, because it feels like that's something he would have been involved in if they had the film rights to him at the time, right? So as a comic book nerd, I can't help but dreaming about that. There's other stuff said, like Wakanda. They meet up with Ulysses Claw for the first time. It's not the first time vibranium's mentioned in the MCU, right? But it is a major part of this story. So
I forgot how much setup there was for Black Panther and Wakanda in this movie. That was something I had forgotten. I sort of remembered all that as being in Civil War, but no, that's definitely here. So
yeah, you forget about that. So coming but relatively not too far from watching Black Panther to revisiting this, looking back at this, having seen what we got in Black Panther and what we had got in Civil War, it kind of made some of the Wakanda sit up and almost filler work, I think, better within the broader story of the MCU. But again, in this film, I don't know. It doesn't weigh it down, but it just seems like you said something's a little bit off. Like this film it begins to dip his feet like in the deeper questions and deeper waters. Like, for example, how the Avengers are being reacted to by society.
Right.
How they are then in turn reacting to society. Like the Iron Legion is a fascinating concept brought up, and almost that this big brother state that Tony Stark wants to create by having his tech begin to look over the world, or the country at least.
Yeah.
And that's kind of alluded at in the beginning of the movie, and then they never really get back. I mean, I know they come back in at the end in Sokovia, but at the same time, I don't think the Iron Legion was really paid off for what it was set up to be.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the movie does introduce a lot. I think that's one of the things, is it introduces a lot of stuff, and it's a very good prelude to Civil War, if that makes sense. I mean, Civil War doesn't work without this movie. But this movie feels like it's setting up Civil War, honestly.
Yeah.
And I watched Civil War right before watching this one, and I still think Civil War is one of the most entertaining Marvel movies. I mean, it gets heavy. It deals with a lot of these concepts more fully, but it also moves at a faster pace, and it's more exciting than this one. Sometimes this one, I guess the tone is just off for me. It feels like each scene maybe just goes on a little bit too long. Pacing is so much of what makes a movie work, and I feel like Avengers just has perfect pacing in that film. I mean, it moves from scene to scene effortlessly, like you're just flipping through pages. This one is one of those movies that there's stuff going on sometimes. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure this need to go on as long, or Thor's plot in this movie
is awful.
Is it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I know people have said it makes more sense, I guess, in light of Ragnarok.
Not really.
Okay. Ragnarok I have not seen yet still. I'm maybe seeing it next week or so.
I want to say this. So there was the whole thing here between the studio, between Disney and Joss Whedon, battling over the script. Mainly the stuff, the Hawkeye Farm stuff,
right,
and the Bruce Banner, Natasha stuff. Whedon wanted to spend more time with that. He wanted to get more into the Bruce and Natasha stuff. The studio didn't want it. They wanted that Thor stuff in there. So the studio forced that in there because originally Thor 3, Thor Ragnarok, was going to be a much more darker movie than what it was set up to, than what it actually ended up being, as opposed to what they set it up to be here. And seeing Thor Ragnarok, which is a great film, but it makes these Thor scenes that much worse because the tone portrayed here is completely different than the threat level and the tone portrayed in Ragnarok. So right. Those Thor scenes, just in hindsight, are, like I said, even worse. So I don't know. But I'll tell you what I do love about this film. Scarlet Witch, Elizabeth Olsen, her accent's not the greatest, her Eastern European accent. I got to say that. But I think she is a really good Scarlet Witch.
It's not as good as your Swedish accent.
No, it's not. Our Andrews. I think she's a really good Scarlet Witch. I think she does. I think one of the problems here is where her power set lies is not established very good in the MCU at all. At first she's very powerful in this movie, right? And then at the end of the movie, when she finds out her brother dies, she's uber powerful. She destroys so much just by letting out her raw emotion, right?
Yeah.
But at no other point really in the MCU, with the exception of her diverting that explosion in Civil War.
Well, that's the only other thing she's been anything else other than Civil War?
I guess she's only been in Age of Ultron and
Civil War at this point. So
yeah, I
so
just
we'll
don't
have to see
think
Infinity War. I mean, Civil War, she's pretty largely confined to the
mansion.
Yeah, to
or
the-
not the
to the-
mansion, the
to the-
facility.
the new Avengers facility. So
I just feel like her power set is. It's been up and down like a seesaw. She's moderately powerful. She's uber powerful. The Scarlet Witch I know is like uber powerful.
yeah,
And I really think if they want a backdoor way to bring the X-Men into this universe, they should do something with House of M and her altering reality. But that's a story probably for a different podcast, probably confirmed crap podcast.
she
but,
has a pretty tough. I would have a hard time explaining to you what Scarlet Witch's power set is. I mean, it's definitely one of those that's a little bit more confusing. And I like, is it Maria Hill who says he's fast and she's weird?
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Yeah, very good explanation. But
Yeah.
it is. You're right. Her power set is weird because it's very
She affects
comparable.
probability, correct? Am I right in that?
More than that, she can, in some cases, she can alter reality.
Because I know she did the whole like no more mutants thing, and
Yeah, she has. I think her best comparison as far as a power set is Doctor Doom, in that she's more magical in the way she does things, whereas Doctor Doom is scientific and magical, but she's definitely on that magic side. But maybe not Doctor Doom. Maybe Doctor Strange would be a
Doctor Strange. I
better
was gonna say,
comparison. Sorry, Doctor Doom. I misspoke.
I was
mean,
like, that's
Doctor
a weird
Strange.
comparison to her Doctor Doom. Doctor Strange makes more sense.
Doctor Strange, yeah, she's magical to that point.
Can you imagine her
Even
and Doctor Strange teaming up in Infinity War?
now, that would be crazy. I would
That'd be
love
awesome,
to see
man.
that. I will say that speaking of fast, Quicksilver's decent in this. He's not great. I mean, he has to follow a
Evan
relative.
Peters?
Yeah, Evan Peters, or maybe that was the same summer, I believe. Or no, Days of Future Past was the year before.
Yeah.
So he had to follow Evan Peters' Quicksilver, which was freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
And then you get Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's not bad here. He's putting in effort. This isn't a Godzilla performance where he's a block of wood. But
Yeah.
but
No,
at
I
the same
hear ya.
but at the same time, it's just he doesn't ooze charisma the way Evan Peters does in almost everything Evan Peters touches, you know?
Quicksilver was in what movie?
He was in X-Men Days of Future Past.
That was 2014, and this is 2015. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
and
this
he
year
was in
before.
X-Men Apocalypse as
Apocalypse.
well.
That was like the only part of the movie I cared about was Quicksilver.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. That was his stuff was great. Rest of the movie, not so good. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think he serves a purpose in this movie. He's a good performance, not a great performance. You remember all the stuff with Whedon, you got to keep hearkening back to that. Like, how much did that impact how good or bad this film was? Like, if Whedon was able to do what he wanted to do, like he did on Avengers 1, could this have been a lot better? So did you like the stuff on the farm, Hawkeye's farm stuff? Because I love that stuff. It gave the film heart, Jerry.
Yeah. I do like it. I think it definitely does slow down the plot a bit, which is not always a bad thing. But I do find I'm very interested in those character on character moments.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's nice because there are a lot of sustained action sequences in this movie. There are a lot of very sustained action sequences. I know the Hulkbuster fight. I mean, so it's
Wow.
nice to counterbalance these things with, again, one of the things I think that the Marvel films have done is you can have scenes with, Cap and Black Widow and Hawkeye and as people in just regular shirts, not their costumes, just like sitting around in t-shirts talking, and you're still completely identifying with the characters.
Yeah, and
I think that's. I mean, again, that's something that I think shows the strength of those portrayals. Is they're fully rounded characters. They're not just superheroes in costumes.
And I really appreciated Hawkeye being given this rich subplot here, coming off of Avengers where he was brainwashed.
Yeah.
I think Whedon really wanted to make up for kind of sidelining Hawkeye in that movie, at least from a hero perspective.
He's kind of the star of this movie. I mean, it sounds weird.
He is.
Because I'm sitting there as I'm watching, and I'm like, this really could have been called Iron Man 4.
Yeah,
right?
oh yes, very Iron Man plot driven.
Very Tony Stark focused. But I'm watching, I'm like, man, Hawkeye is the one who has like some of the most incredible scenes and the funny lines and the powerful lines and the soliloquies. These are all going to Hawkeye. He definitely seems like he is the character one of those characters that Joss Whedon just loves.
Yeah, you can tell how much he loves Clint Barton. One of my favorite moments in all the MCU is when Scarlet Witch is freaking out. She has already sided with the Avengers at this part. They're kind of down in an old house or some debris. They're kind of behind cover, and Hawkeye gives her this speech on what it means to be a hero and what it means to being an Avenger. And this was Joss Whedon's writing hitting on all cylinders. You can tell he knows that character. He wrote Clint Barton so well for the movies that he was able to write him. And that movie, that scene, that speech he gives her about you come out from behind this wall, you're a hero, you're an Avengers. If it was in a lesser writer's hands, that would be so cheesy. But it's handled so well in this movie. And then when Clint goes out there, and then when Wanda goes out there and starts kicking ass, man, that is a freaking awesome scene, is it not, Jerry?
It is, and I love through the whole movie how he keeps making references to how he could just accidentally shoot Quicksilver and nobody would know. He just walked in front of him. So it's pretty funny. He has some good lines to himself too.
And his suit is awesome. I love his
really
outfit.
Cool outfit in this movie.
Yes, and they never made a Marvel Legend of it, but they did make a hot toy that's still available.
Okay, interesting.
I will say that. I look at that from time to time. But you couldn't just have a Hawkeye hot toy, Jerry. That wouldn't be right.
Yeah, you'd have to have them all.
Yeah, exactly. But no, freaking awesome, though. I think that would be kind of cool, though. What if there was somebody that just collected, like, Hawkeye hot toys?
I have a friend that collects Hawkeye stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Who is it?
A friend I knew from work.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah,
because that's a character that's reasonable, you know.
She was a big Hawkeye fan, and she was not completely sold on the MCU interpretation. I think talking to her from time to time, she thought that this version of Clint Barton went pretty far away from the comic version. But I mean, again, she was like a really hardcore Hawkeye fan, so probably be like the same as me talking about, some version of like a Gotham character. I mean, I don't know. I probably had my own idea in mind. So
they do have an awesome SH Figure Arts Hawkeye in this outfit. But
really?
He goes for like $130 now.
Oh, you sell half your Marvel Legends and buy it.
No.
Maybe you can trade with him. Maybe you can trade with Carlos.
It's Carlo, like the wrestler.
I'm sorry.
No, that was Carlito. Never mind. But no, I would want to put him with the Marvel Legends, Jerry.
Holy smokes! I do see one for $155.
Yeah, and then there's that one that I had with the glasses from the Walmart set that goes for $60 to $70 now in the box.
Yeah, you should have kept it.
Yeah, I gotta find me a Hawkeye. Damn it, why did I even ever think about
selling? There was one I saw, there was like an Age of Ultron exclusive, right? And
there was an Age of Ultron Hawkeye, but it was like, he was in the Avengers outfit without the glasses, and the sculpt's just not as good. It's okay, it's not bad.
Oh, there's the one that comes with the Age of Ultron set that has Thor and Black Widow in the outfit with the blue and Bruce Banner.
And then there's one that's that same figure that's in the old. It has like a Hulkbuster Build-A-Figure.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I remember seeing that one too. So
yeah, and that one's not as. It's not bad. It's just not like top notch.
Do you have Bruce Banner?
No, and I saw him and I thought about it, but the sculpting. I know they'll never make that figure, but compared to like Marvel Legends now, it's just like it's an okay figure. But enough about Marvel Legends. We have plenty of time to talk about me buying and selling those. What about the Hulkbuster? Speaking of that Build-A-Figure, this was going into this and going even into the MCU after the first Iron Man, I salivated and dreamed about a Hulkbuster armor. To me, the armor and the fight lived up to the hype. The fact that it was Veronica's, what he called it, Betty and Veronica, the whole Archie thing.
That's pretty funny.
Going to Betty Ross. Just that whole go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, just hitting him. Just, that where he
with
grabs.
With like the pneumatic arm that just...
Yeah, oh my gosh.
It is. Again, there are some really good action scenes in this movie, and the Hulkbuster one is pretty impressive.
Just how he deploys the like force field around the Hulk,
and then shoots down the big metal cage.
Oh, dude,
and stuff from the Veronica satellite.
Logistically, that stuff was so well plotted out and so well done.
Yeah, they again, they it's pretty interesting too how Iron Man's armor would go through and mention. All right, nobody in this building, or no people in this building. So they were kind of referencing the whole, wanton superhero destruction thing that happens in movies where, buildings are just getting trashed left and right.
What year did Man of Steel come out?
Man of Steel came out in 2013. So
okay, yeah. So there you go. I think this is kind of a response to that. Oh my gosh! And I don't hate Man of Steel, but
I like Man of Steel better than this movie. But I don't dislike this movie either.
No, this movie has some problems. It's not perfect, but it's far from being a crappy movie either.
You know what? This movie, watching through, and maybe you didn't get this, but obviously this is not this movie. Does the overall structure of Justice League not make you think of this movie at times?
Justice League,
I don't know.
In some ways,
as I kept watching this fight, I'm like, this the whole ending scene, the whole ending battle, makes me think of Justice League. I don't know why. There's just something about
I need to rewatch Justice League. I have it. I haven't rewatched it yet.
I couldn't nail down specifics, but it's as I'm watching this movie again, I was like, golly, it feels like Justice League borrowed a lot from this movie. And
it's called Joss Whedon wrote both of them.
Well, that's true. I wanted to talk about that real quick because we were mentioning this. We've talked about that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been this back and forth about how much freedom do you give your director, to create a unique vision for that movie, that character, and then how much does the studio come in and say, okay, this is what needs to happen. And I think this is an interesting one. This is the movie where if there has been a back and forth between the director and the studio about, a disagreement, I think this is the movie where it's the most pronounced out of all of the Marvel films.
It's felt too.
It feels like the director and the studio are clearly having different objectives for the film. It's fascinating that post Age of Ultron is when we start seeing these movies taking more risks and doing more fascinating things from time to time.
I don't know if that was the response. To this movie, the movie made a ton of money. It
did, but
well
again,
received.
You mentioned how Ragnarok was supposed to be one thing, and then it, I haven't seen it, but it's clear Ragnarok goes in a completely different direction, than this film.
It kind of feels like Justice League in the way that it's different visions here. The studio has one vision and so does Whedon. Whereas in Justice League, there's part of the Snyder vision and there's Whedon's vision, which is kind of like studio puppeteering in a way. So no, there are similarities, and if you look at it, we talked about this in our Justice League review. Andrew and I did. If you look at Avengers, Age of Ultron, and Justice League, there's a lot of similarities between the three movies, for better or for worse. But go listen back to that podcast if you want to hear that. There's cool character beats here. I mean, you gotta love when they're trying to lift Thor's hammer at the party, and then when Thor finally gets his hammer lifted by Vision, when Vision shows up, it's like, holy crap moment. So you like Paul Bettany as Vision? I thought just having Jarvis become Vision was a brilliant move.
That was a really good idea. I mean, that voice, Paul Bettany just has a very good voice and a very noble presence that fits Vision well, that fits Jarvis and Vision very well.
Yeah. All right, Jerry. So we've broken down Age of Ultron here. Before we give it an updated rating, what else do you want to say? Anything else about Age of Ultron?
I'm trying to think of anything else that I really wanted to say about the movie. Again, I liked it, but I did watch it in a couple parts, and I still think that there is a lot of stuff in this movie that editing should have improved this movie and streamlined it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that no matter how good a movie is, you know, a really good movie that's long and a really good movie that's short all have a pace that just flows. And this movie, at times, the pacing is just off. And I mean, you can have a good movie that has a part that, you know, gives you some respite. You know, like the farmhouse scene is kind of a respite from the audience because we've had these massive battles and then we have more massive battles. But this movie just doesn't have its pacing down, and it sometimes feels like it goes off in far too many directions.
I love the farmhouse scene where they're playing darts and Clint's doing dishes and he just hits the bullseye and gives, I think it's Steve that look, one of them that look. I
think it's Tony. It's Tony, because Tony's standing right there. And I mean, again, you've got like the romance between Hulk and Black Widow, which I love. I mean, I really like the thought of those two characters together.
Big part of Thor Ragnarok, and it looks like it's gonna be played up in Infinity War.
I love the whole Cap and Iron Man sort of having at it while they're out there cutting wood, and I mean, clearly Tony's got like this small pile of wood and Cap's just like chopping away. I mean, there's
ripping wood apart.
There's some great visual gags and stuff as well. I mean, there's a lot of humor. I feel that some of the humor falls flat in this movie. It doesn't feel as natural. It feels a little more forced at times. But I don't know. So, updated ratings. Did I rate this movie at some point?
I don't know if you did. Real quick before you rate it, I just want to say the Quicksilver sacrifice at the end, when he sacrifices it so they can get the people off of Segovia on the helicarriers, very noble. I really thought it was going to be Clint. I'm glad it wasn't Hawkeye, but I just thought that was a very cool scene and did add some real stakes to the movie. But Jerry, what's your rating for this?
I think after watching it, I'd probably give this one a good and a half.
Okay, I'm going to give it a great, which is coming down from the epic I gave Avengers when we rewatched that. So I'm going to say that is a great. So that's just about going to wrap it up for the 90th edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. Jerry, where can people find more of you this week?
Keep checking me out, serving up reviews hot and fresh daily at actionfigurebarbecue.com. That's BARBECUE.com.
All right, this is a reminder that this podcast can be found many places: iTunes, Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, the Epic Review, thepicreview.com. dgww.com, Action Figure Barbecue, that's barbecue spelled out.com. You can find us there. You can find us on Stitcher now. We just posted our RSS feed to there, so if you go on Stitcher and search Confirmed Epic Podcast, I know that's an Android app. A lot of people who don't use iPhones use to listen to podcasts, so definitely check us out on there. And we have listeners from all those platforms, and we appreciate it. Jerry, I think next week on episode 91, we're going to look back on, in honor of the film's recent Blu-ray release, Batman Sub-Zero. So that should be fun.
All right.
I'm recording like 4 podcasts this week because Jerry and I are recording 2 confirmed craps to release when our baby's born, because I know I'll need to take some time
You and
off.
Abby's baby, not you and I.
Jerry and I, our babe, no, Abby
the
and
epic
I.
review. This podcast is our.
Yeah, it is. So, and then Andrew and I are recording a top 10 most anticipated movies of summer coming out for 2018, and we're gonna probably post that, I don't know, at the end of April. So we're trying to bank some content this week. Jerry and I are both off of work, that way and Jerry will be doing the tour of the DC Universe pod too, so don't worry. I take some time off for the baby, of course. Yeah, I'll probably take like 2 weeks off, but Jerry, we're gonna have more than enough content, and we'll get back at it. You can find me on Twitter at The Real Brad Bell, on Instagram, Confirmed Epic Podcast, and of course at the Epic Review, thepicreview.com. And Jerry, once again, from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, we are out.
That's all I have to say about that.
This has been a production of the GWW Radio Network. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, check out Geeks Worldwide at thegww.com for all the latest news, reviews, and opinions on video games, comics, movies, TV, cosplay, and more. Geeks, assemble!